Hello and welcome to Northern Nightmares. As always, I'm Andrew, your host, and this week's episode will be a light story before we get into more dark crimes and events that I have planned for this month. Today we're heading to the Golden State of California, and I'm sorry, but we're not checking out LA or the wonderful beaches. We're going to make our way to San Jose, to which one could find one of the strangest houses ever made. Imagine this. Just a few minutes away from the heart of the city, just off of Winchester Boulevard, one would find a property with a gate and bushes surrounding the property. If one were to drive into the property, one would find a monstrosity of a mansion, sitting on 6 acres of land, spanning 24,000 feet. This place is one of the largest mansions out there. Before 1906, the mansion had up to 500 rooms, but due to a foreseeable earthquake, parts of the property was destroyed, reducing the rooms down to 160. Today, there's also 40 staircases, 2,000 doors, and 10,000 windows, according to the National Register of Historical Places. But why does such a building exist? Well, as the story goes, Sarah Winchester built the monstrosity in hope to confuse the angry spirits that were out for revenge. Their target was her. But to what caused these so-called vengeful spirits? Well, we'll get to that in a moment. For this is the story of the Winchester Mystery House and the story of Sarah Winchester. Now let me ask you this. When you hear the word Winchester, what is it that you first think of? Unfortunately, if you were thinking of the dashing, handsome boys Sam and Dean Winchester from Supernatural, I hate to break it to you, I don't have a story about them just yet. No, I'm referring to the famous rifle, first developed in 1866. It was a lever-action rifle made by the Winchester Rifle Arms Company. Now, to understand the history of Sarah and her home, one needs to understand the gun's history. As Sarah was married to William Wirt Winchester, the only son of Oliver Winchester, the founder, or at least one of the founders, of the Winchester Company. The first model of the Winchester rifle was made, as I said, in 1866. I would say at least a year after the American Civil War. This is when tensions were extremely high between the North and the South states over the rights of the slaves. Now, the conflict had ended in 1865. The previous rifle during this time was called the Henry rifle, which compared to the Winchester was a very similar gun. The Winchester is a lever-action repeating rifle. It was a newer version of the Henry rifle. Both guns fired a 44mm rimfire bullet and allowed the user to fire multiple rounds. The main difference between the two rifles was mostly design, like the barrels and stock. Both rifles used the lever-action mechanism. However, the Winchester was an improved model, making better use of the locking and feeding system. For the bullets. Its barrel also had a stronger steel to prevent bending and to withstand higher pressures. The Henry was known to bend and damage much easier. The Henry was marked as the soldier's preferred gun during the Civil War. However, the Winchester was known as the gun that won the West. Besides handguns, this was the rifle for the cowboys. The Winchester earned that title after the 1873 model, though. The 1873 model was the iconic gun one would see in the old pictures, find in the stories, or even see it in the movies. It was manufactured between 1973 and 1923, and it was designed to have a 44-40 cartridge. Throughout its years, the company made many different variations and models of the famous rifle. This was the rifle that made the Winchester Company one of the most prominent American guns manufacturers. Even today, Winchester is one of the biggest names when it comes to firearms. Focusing on the 1800s, though, for this story is important to understand the history of the Winchester Mystery House. After the Civil War, the American West had a boom in economic growth, industrialization, and urbanization. White settlers from the East and from Europe flocked to the West in hopes of making it big. What everyone thinks of during this time, though, is the cowboys, horses, new towns, saloons, etc. This was the great frontier of the colonization. However, North America first belonged to the natives that lived here first, for the settlers fought them and took over their land, and during these harsh times of war with the peoples of this land, the white settlers used the Winchester as their main firearm. This was used in such battles like the Indian Wars, the Russo-Turkish War, and Battle of Wounded Knee. In the company's eyes, they were making a killing, no pun intended, from gun sales. However, it's thought many people died due to being shot by a Winchester rifle. The company believed the guns weren't made for killing, but a tool for survival. And for Sarah, she had married William Winchester, the only son of Oliver Winchester, as I said, one of the founders of the company. Sarah and William were rolling in money, as William was a treasurer for the company. However, in 1881, William had died due to tuberculosis. The couple were living in New Haven, Connecticut at the time. After his passing, Sarah had inherited a lot of money and decided to move to Santa Clara Valley in California, which is now San Jose, to which she built her home, the La Landa Villa, to which later on would become the Winchester Mystery House. Now you're probably asking me, what does the gun have to do with Sarah and the house? Well, we'll get to that in a little bit, but just a little backstory on Sarah. She was born in 1839 in New Haven, Connecticut. Not as a lot known about her childhood, but she was often called Sally by her close friends and family. In 1866, her and William gave birth to a daughter, Annie Pardee Winchester. Unfortunately, she was diagnosed with marasmus, a severe malnutrition of energy deficiency. She only lived for a month. Between the fall of 1880 and the spring of 1881, Sarah had lost her mother-in-law, her father-in-law, Oliver Winchester, and her husband, William. She was left with a giant inheritance from her husband, which allowed her to move to California. In 1884, Sarah's eldest sister, Mary Converse, passed away. Needless to say, Sarah was for the most part alone in the world, living in the Golden State with her money and eventually her giant home. Now, the reason she moved was because her doctor in Connecticut suggested a warmer climate as she was developing rheumatoid arthritis. Now, when she was living in New Haven with her husband, the two shared an interest in architecture and interior design. Sarah had come up with plans for her home on her own. It is said she took inspiration from the World's Fair. This was a grand expedition event that showcased things from around the world. Her ideas for her home came from such event, or at least the early designs. If construction didn't meet her expectations, she would abandon that project and move on to another one. Due to her difficult and always changing designs, her home became one giant maze as it is today. There's a rumor that a 7-story tower was planned to be erected. However, each time it was built, she would have it torn down and rebuilt again. This happened a total of 16 times. With all her crazy expansions to her home, there are sections that are walled off, exterior windows closed in, doors that were removed that went nowhere, multiple levels in different sections, and some going as high as 5. The core design was supposed to be Victorian with aspirations of a Gothic vibe and Romanesque features. The house had many different features, all grand and spectacular. If one were to go into the ballroom, one would find the floor and ceiling were both made of wood, such as teak, maple, and mahogany. Both had intricate patterns carved into them. There was also a fireplace, made from bricks that included 2 windows. The windows also included quotes from the great poet Shakespeare as well. One could find throughout the house chandeliers from Germany, many furnishings from parts of Asia, art glass pieces from Austria, and even paintings from France. There were bedrooms that had sitting rooms and even sewing rooms. Sarah even installed a device called an annunciator, an early version of an intercom to call servants. She even had an indoor garden. The room included slanted floors so that when the garden received water, any excess water would run down the floors to trapdoors, to which had pipes that led to the outside gardens. At the house's largest was 500 rooms, but why was her house so large? Well, it's thought that she just had an artistic vision. However, there is another reason, a reason to the house's labyrinth design. As the story goes, Sarah built the house in such a wild way because she was afraid of the paranormal. The ghosts that fell victim to being shot by a Winchester rifle were out for revenge, and Sarah was the only Winchester left alive since everyone else had passed on. The ghosts wanted revenge, and Sarah was determined to escape their wrath. She built the house in a maze-like style, hallways that were dead ends, doors that led nowhere, stairs that went up to ceilings, windows that would open to nothing, doors that would lead outside from the bottom floors to even the highest floors. All of this was to confuse the spirits, making it harder for them to find her. Sarah believed if she had slept in a different room every night, it would make it even harder for them to find her. There is also a legend that says that Sarah performed daily seances. It said that she would try to contact good spirits to figure out why the evil ones wanted her. She had no involvement with the rifle. Contractors that worked at the house claimed spirit mediums would come and go every day, seances going on while construction was happening. Sarah would even make secret passageways throughout the house so spirits and people wouldn't be able to track her movements. She could appear and disappear right before your very eyes, simply entering one of the secret doors. As Sarah got older though, her health issues would grow worse. Her arthritis never healed after moving into a warmer climate. Teeth started to fall out. She also became a much more recluse. The less she appeared in the public, the more the rumors and lore would build throughout the community. Some claim she was becoming mad and because of the spirits. Some say she was just superstitious, avoiding people to stay alive. And some say there was no ghost, but that Sarah was just an old, lonely woman that eventually became extremely paranoid. Her employees, gardeners, and anyone else she kept close say otherwise. That she was completely sane. That she wasn't what the rumors claim. She wasn't mentally ill, but just she was a fiery, financially competent, independent woman with an artistic vision just for her home. Now in 1906, I said earlier, San Jose experienced a deadly earthquake. This earthquake destroyed a good chunk of her home, making the 500-room mansion down to 160. Once damage was repaired, Sarah never rebuilt the lost sections, but only kept up with odd, random jobs. The only new addition to the house was in 1916 when she added an elevator, as due to her age, stairs were becoming harder to deal with. In 1922, Sarah had passed away due to congestive heart failure. She was 83. Her house had 160 rooms, 2,000 doors, 10,000 windows, 47 stairways, 47 fireplaces, 13 bathrooms, and 6 kitchens. Even after Sarah's death, legends still surround the famous house. There were claims that workers died on site during construction. One claim says that a worker walked out a door only to land outside from being up a few floors, dying on impact. Another where a worker lost his way and was never found again. The thought was that he was probably stuck in one of the walls, and during construction, that section was walled up. However, these are just rumors as no evidence proves that this even happened. But there were a couple casualties. In 1893, one worker died from falling from a scaffolding, breaking his neck from the fall. Now this could be where the rumor of a worker falling to his death stems from. In 1910, another worker died because he was crushed by a falling beam in the basement. But those were the only two recorded deaths that happened on the premises, besides Sarah's, that we know of. As even today, visitors, guests, and even ghost hunters claim they have experienced some form of paranormal activity. Cold spots, the sound of footsteps, unknown smells coming from the kitchen, only to find nothing there. Whispers, disembodied voices, doors and windows slamming on their own, the feeling of being watched. Now this all could be because people just want to believe that something haunted is there, that our mind tricks us in believing that there are ghosts. Or there could be very well something here. It's thought to be the most haunted home in the US, possibly even the world, due to the legends that thousands of ghosts live here. But what if there isn't thousands, but just one? Maybe Sarah never left her home. Maybe she is still there as of today, watching and protecting her home. Well, you can experience all of this yourself. Just head to San Jose to 525 South Winchester Boulevard, to which the house is located. Ticket prices for tours average about $40 for adults, $36 for seniors, and $30 for children. However, tours aren't the only thing that goes on here. One of the rooms was converted into a cafe called Cafe 13, as Sarah was obsessed with the number. Some rooms had 13 doors or 13 windows. In the attic, there's a shooting gallery with vintage shooting games with the famous Winchester rifle. Magicians, illusionists, and other performers put on shows here throughout the year. You can even book a private event and even host your own wedding at the mansion. You and your guests will have permission to explore the home, have your event outside in Sarah's garden, a night that everyone will remember and will haunt their memories. I will put a link in my show notes to the websites you can explore all the house has to offer. If you want to experience the story in your home, you can check out the 2018 horror movie Winchester, based on the house and Sarah's story, starring Helen Mirren. This gives you a little taste of the paranormal claims that surround the house. And this is our story this week of the famous Winchester Mystery House and the story of Sarah Winchester. I hope you enjoyed this little tale this week, something easy to digest before we get back into more dark and gruesome tales. In saying that, next week we'll be back in the Maritimes of Canada. For next week's tale is a famous tragic aircraft crash that shocked the nation, but more on that later. Make sure you have a barf bag nearby, as we'll be experiencing extreme turbulence and possibly a fire during this tale. As always, hit the subscribe button to get notified when new episodes drop. Feel free to email me at northernnightmares@outlook.com to share stories for future episodes. This is your home for nightmarish tales throughout Canada and beyond. I'll see you soon, sweet dreams, and remember, nightmares are closer than you think.